start whenever you like.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming this morning. So you might know that I'm from California, and people tell me all the time that in California, Los Angeles, the entertainment capital of the world, everything there is either fake real or real fake. So what they say is if you go to Disneyland, Disney really captures your imagination. You meet these fictitious characters, Mickey, Minnie, Donald Duck, and they come to life. And they look almost real, but they're fake. It's a real fake. On the other hand, you go to Universal Studios afterwards, and you take this bus tour through the movie sets, and you see all these buildings. Again, they look real, but it's a fake real. It's not real, it's a fake real. And unfortunately, that's the type of world we live in today. We live in either a real fake world or a fake real world. And today's topic is, let's get real. So, I think the same is true with relationships today. Relationships are either fake real or real fake. You know, some people, you go on social media and you look at their profile page, and on the page they have pictures of the most perfect vacations, pictures of the perfect spouse, the perfect children, and everything is great. It's almost like an alternate reality. And it's a real fake reality that's not real life. And then when you meet them in person, it's a fake real. Hey, how you doing? Good, Baruch Hashem. Yeah, we'll be in touch, right? Right. You'll see you next Shabbos, right? Yeah. Do you have my number? No. Again, it's a fake real. And today I want to talk to you about how we can become really real and develop, cultivate deep and meaningful relationships. So, when my wife and I moved to LA a few years ago, I remember Los Angeles, if you ever visit, it's a very health-conscious culture. And I remember I was swept up by this health-conscious culture. I remember we went to shop in a place called Erewhon and Whole Foods. And within a few months, I decided, okay, I'm going to try this. Gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, and I realized the label, the more free it said on the label, the more expensive it became actually. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. And within a few weeks, I was really, I cut out sugar out of my diet, I cut chocolate out of my diet, I cut candy out of my diet, all the good foods. And then one day, I decided to take it to the next level. I decided to start juicing every single day. I remember I went to Best Buy and I bought the most expensive juicer on the shelf. I think it was $350. I bought the juicer, I went to Whole Foods, I bought organic, fresh, green vegetables. And I brought it all home and I started juicing breakfast, lunch, and supper. By the end of the day, I expected to feel very healthy, energetic, vibrant, and alive, and I see you're shaking your head already, you know the story. I was feeling so sick. I was doubling over in pain. And I remember I turned to my wife, I said, what's going on? I should be feeling great by now, right? And she said to me, compassionately, she said, Yoel, I think it's the juice. I said, the juice. You know, I learned very early on that in every relationship, one is always right and the other is the husband. So, the men are not laughing, notice. And it took me a while, but I processed what she said, and it was true. It was the juice. And I learned a very important lesson as I was laying in bed. I thought to myself, wow, isn't it amazing? You can have the healthiest ingredients, the best tools, the best juicer, but you can't change your life overnight. You can't become healthy overnight. It takes time, it takes consistency. And with relationships, especially to develop and cultivate deep and meaningful relationships, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a year, not even 2, not even 3. Sometimes my wife and I look back 10 years ago and we laugh because we think, wow, we thought we were in a relationship 10 years ago. What a joke. It takes time, number one. So I want to talk to you about 2 ideas today that you can implement immediately, but you only see the results if you're consistent and you do this every single day. So let's start with idea number 1. This past Sukkot, my family and I had the opportunity to be in Eretz Yisrael for Yom Tov. So we lived in Israel 5 years. After we got married, we moved, England, LA, and we got back to Israel with our children, and it was a very special experience. I'll never forget this. I was standing at the Kaisel Plaza. If you've ever been to Israel, by the Kaisel, standing at the Kaisel Plaza, it was Monday morning Chol Hamoed. I was standing with lulav and esrog in hand, and I was davening Hallel. And all of a sudden, I felt it. We hadn't begun saying Mashav Ruach Hamoed Geshem yet, but it was drizzling. And I thought to myself, this is Israel. It's Chol Hamoed Sukkos. I'll just wait it out. It'll stop. But I was wrong. It continued to drizzle. The drizzle turned into a downpour of rain, and everybody began running towards the crevices, the tunnels alongside the coastal plaza. Now you had, hundreds, if not thousands, because it was Chol Hamoed Sukkos. You had all tourists and everybody was coming to be Oil Regel, and it was packed. And I ran into one of the smaller tunnels alongside the Kaisel Plaza. And we were standing shoulder to shoulder. Everybody was waiting for the storm to pass. And I think it was a Gerach Chassid in front of me, a Belzer behind me, a Chaloni on the side, and a Sephardi on the other side. And we're standing squished. And all of a sudden, I heard it. The back of the tunnel, must have been a 15-year-old bacher. He started singing, V'samachto b'chagecho ve'oyiso ach someach. And within seconds, that chant, that song, turned into, everybody erupted in song and everybody was holding hand in hand. And it was just, I was standing there thinking to myself, wow. The quote that came to my mind was, life is not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's learning how to dance in the rain. And that's exactly what we're doing by the Kaisel. And I recalled an incident when I was in high school. I went to Adelphia, New Jersey. And I remember after I graduated, I went to learn in Lakewood. And I was learning in Lakewood one day, and I got a call from my 9th grade Rabbi who always kept up with me. His name is Rabbi David Trank. Very special man. You know him. Rav David Trank is, I think, one of the Gedolah Mechanchim of our generation. And he called me up. He always kept up with me. And he says, he screams into the phone, Yoeli! I said, hello, Rabbi. He said, Yoeli, I went to Camp Monk in Adelphia, and he said, you remember this and this guy? He's getting married tonight. I was wondering if you know where the wedding is. I want to go to the wedding. So I said, Rabbi, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I think the wedding is in a Terrace of Rum in Williamsburg. So he puts down the phone with me, and that was that. I didn't hear from him again. The next day, I bumped into a friend of mine. And in the course of the conversation, I discovered, actually, as I was talking to him, he knew the guy. I didn't go to the wedding because I didn't keep up with him. But he knew the guy. And he said to me, the wedding was actually the atrium in Muncie. So I thought to myself, oh no, I hope Rebbe didn't go to a Terrace of Rum in Williamsburg. It's like, a 3-hour drive from the atrium? If it's rush hour, forget it. And he said to me, no, Yoeli, don't worry about it. If he didn't call you, you probably made it to the atrium. I said, I hope you're right. A few weeks later, I was walking, I think it was Clifton and Lakewood, and on the other side of the street, I hear, Yoeli! And I hear, Rabbi, how are you? And across the street, and we have a conversation, and we start talking. In the course of the conversation, I remembered the wedding. I said, Rebbe, did you ever make the wedding in the atrium? And he looks at me, and a faint smile appears on his face. I'll never forget this. And I knew I'm in trouble. And he said to me, he says, Yoel, I want to tell you something. And his face turned serious. He said, almost 6,000 years ago, when Hashem created the world, he decided that David Schrank will have to sit in traffic from Lakewood to New York 3 hours in rush hour, and then go back 3 hours from New York to Lakewood. Yoeli, don't worry about it. You might have been the catalyst, but you weren't the reason. There must have been another reason. I don't know it yet myself, but just forget it. I said, Rabbi, I feel so terrible. Please, what did you do? What happened? He said, I came into this wedding, and he is, a Litvish guy with a Hasidic spirit. And he walks in the Teres Avram, and he sees that everybody's wearing a shtreimel, the chassan is wearing a spadik. And he looks around, and he says, I think this was a mistake. I'm in the wrong place. So he said, Yoeli, I looked up to heaven, and I said, Hashem, for some reason I have to be here. I don't know why, but I got to be here. I grabbed the chassan's hand. If you know him, it makes sense. He goes over there in the middle of the circle, he grabs the chassan's hand, he dances with him a minute, and he drives back to Lakewood, never making the wedding in the atrium. I said, Rabbi, I feel so terrible. I'm so sorry. He said, Yoeli, don't worry about it. I think it was probably the most powerful shiur he ever gave me. And it was a short while ago, I spoke at a Beina Olam event in Brooklyn. And I wanted to repeat the story. I called him up and I said, Rabbi, can I share the story with people? He said, don't share it. Nobody has to know about this. Why do you have to publicize my name and the story? I said, you know why, Rabbi? I said, because when people hear the story, they might be inspired and learn a lesson of what it means to dance in the rain. That even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging, you can dance in the rain. You don't have to wait for the storm to pass because you have a emunah that wherever I am in life, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. Doesn't make sense sometimes, but that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I remember the Medrash. The Medrash says, an amazing Medrash, the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law Yisro, everybody knows he was in Midian, and one day he comes to the sneh. So the Medrash says, how did Moshe Rabbeinu get from Midian to the sneh? We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu appears the very first time to Moshe at the sneh. But how did he get from Midian, point A, to point B? It's a couple of days. The sneh is in the middle of the desert. It's Har Sinai. That's where we received the Torah. How did he get from Midian to the sneh? The Medrash tells us an amazing story. Medrash says one day Moshe Rabbeinu was in the outskirts of Midian shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law. And one sheep, Ein Shefelo, Ein Shepselo, broke away from the flock and runs deeper into the midbar. Runs deeper into the midbar, and Moshe Rabbeinu was 80 years old. He's chasing this little shefel, and he finally slows down. Somewhere in the middle of the desert, the shefel sees a pool of water, thirsty, and begins to drink. Starts drinking, and Moshe Rabbeinu is overcome with compassion. And he waits for the little sheep to finish drinking, picks up the shefel, and puts the head on his shoulder, and he says, you must be so tired. You must be so tired. Let me walk you back. Let me hold you. Let me carry you. And as soon as he turned around, the Medrash tells us, he turned around to walk back to Midian. There it was. A burning bush that wasn't being consumed. Hasneh boyer be'esh ve'inenu ukol. And right away Moshe Rabbeinu says, wow! What a mara! And Machlokes in the Medrash, if he took 3 steps or he just turned his head, but either way, he was a Sar Lirais, and as soon as he took those steps, he made a move. Hashem says, Moshe. Hashem speaks to him. Hashem says, what does Hashem say? We all know what Hashem says. Take off your shoes. Ki ha'makom asher ata oimed olav admas koideshu. And the Chafetz Chaim says, listen to this. Chafetz Chaim says, Hashem said to him, you thought when this little shefela broke away from the flock and ran deeper into the midbar, you thought it was a detour. You thought somebody gave you the wrong directions, Tateres Avram. You thought there was a setback. Hashem says, what seemed like a setback was a setup. I brought you here because I want to talk to you. Hamakoim asher ata oimedolav admas kodesh, it's holy ground. So sometimes we're faced with a difficult situation. It doesn't go as planned. We have to remember, hamakoim asher ata oimedolav admas kodesh, dance in the rain, because that rain is planting the seeds for something big. So the Rechaim HaKadosh asks a very simple question. Rechaim says, 1 second. So you're telling me you're supposed to come to a certain place and stand there so Hashem can talk to him. So why didn't Hashem tell him to take off his shoes before he steps onto the holy ground? Why did Hashem wait until he stepped onto the Admas Kodesh to tell him to take off his shoes? I remember when my mother did spongea when I was a kid, I had to take off my shoes before I walked into the house. Not as soon as I walked into the house, it ruined. So if it's Hamakom asher ata oimedolav admas kodesh, Hashem should have told him, Shal ne'olecha mal raglecha beforehand. So Reb Zalman Sorotzkin, he says a Moyer de Gevart, he says, you know why? Because beforehand, it wasn't Kodesh. Do you know who made that ground holy? Moshe Rabbeinu. You know how? By not getting dysregulated, not getting frustrated, not getting upset, by staying grounded, no pun intended. Hamakoim asher ata oimedolav. You came to the wedding and danced. You stood by the kaisel and danced. It was raining. It wasn't comfortable, but you were oimedolav. You stood there. You faced it. You were present. You were in the here and now. You were in the moment. You stay in the moment, it's Admas Kodesh. You can bring Kedusha into your homes, into your communities, by staying in the moment. If it's Hamakom asher ata oimedolav Admas Kodesh, and now Shal no'olecha mal raglecha, take off your shoes, because you've been elevated to the status of a malach. So I have an opportunity to be a rabbi in a shul. People say, oh, you're a Rav in Los Angeles. I always say, Rabbi Emmanuel Feldman from Atlanta once told me, what's the difference between a rabbi and a Rav? So I'm not a Rav. He says a Rav leads, a rabbi serves. Very different functions. That's why the Rav sits with his back facing everybody else. You want to follow, I'll lead, no problem. The rabbi sits in his front facing everybody. He makes sure everybody is happy. So I'm a rabbi, and I sit facing everybody else. And I'll never forget this one Shabbos morning. Shachris is at 9 o'clock. I walk into shul, and I see, all the way from the back in the coffee room, I see that there's a 12-year-old boy, and he walks out with a piping hot cup of coffee. And he walks over to a guy, right next to a guy. His name is Dr. Arnie Ross. He's a pediatric podiatrist, very, very nice man. And he puts this cup of coffee down right next to Arnie. And he's about to open a siddur to daven. And something inside of me tells me that this is a setup for disaster. It didn't take 30 seconds. He opens a siddur. As soon as he opens a siddur, he opens a siddur onto the cup of coffee, and the whole cup of coffee spills on Arnie Ross, on his Shabbos suit. So I quickly take my siddur and I cover my face. I did not want to see Arnie's reaction. I was like, oh no. But I guess my curiosity got the better end of me, and I peeked out from my siddur. Ladas maye asalai. What's going to happen to this 12-year-old boy? And I'll never forget this. I see Arnie. He leans back in his chair very comfortably. And he lets out a sigh, and he smiles, looking at the kid, and he says, ah, what a warm experience. I was shocked. Talk about a makay asher ata oimedolav admas kodesh. I was so impressed. I remember walking over to Arnie afterwards, and I said, Dr. Ross, how did you do that? And he looked me in the eye, and he said, Rabbi, pointing to his suit, he said, I just decided to go with the flow. I think the most important part of relationships is being in the here and now, being in the moment. That's not always easy. We have such busy lives, but remember, Hamakom asher ata omed olav, the spouse that you chose, the children that you have, the people that come into your life, they're orchestrated by divine providence. Hamakom asher ata omed olav. Hashem says, exactly where you are, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. Hamakom asher ata omed olav ad mas kaideshu. You can make it holy. I want to tell you an amazing, amazing story. Now, if I tell you I hear stories all day. People contact me, email me, call me, and stop me telling me stories. This is by far one of the best stories I ever heard. This is unbelievable. But it really illustrates the point we're talking about. So a girl, she's 23 years old. She asked me not to mention her name. We'll call her Chana Weinstock. Let's call her Chana Weinstock. I hope nobody's name here is Chana Weinstock. So she calls me up, she says, Rabbi, I have a great story to share with you. I was like, okay, go. She said a few months ago she was in Eretz Yisrael, she was in Israel. And she was staying in Tzfat for Shabbos. She was in Tzfat for Shabbos. And she said that she wasn't feeling so well. She was dehydrated a little bit. She really was having headaches. She was feeling nauseous. And she said that she decided, instead of saying Matzah Shabbos Sundays throughout the weekend, she was supposed to stay there for a longer time. She'll go back to Har Nof where she was staying at, and she'll come back, she'll rest up. She goes back to Har Nof. She rests up Sunday afternoon. She gets a call. She's in bed, not feeling so well. She gets a call from a friend in Haifa. And their friend says, Chana, I need a favor. I'm working on a project for a certain company, and I need a picture from the Har HaBayis, from a certain angle on the Har HaBayis. Now you can get that angle, that picture, if you stand on a certain place on the Har HaZeisim. So she asked Chana, could you please go to Har HaZeisim, take a bus, Shar Shechem, and you'll get there, and you'll stand there. And she told her exactly where she has to be. Anyways, Chana wasn't feeling well, but she really wanted to do her friend this favor, so she gets up, Mamish Mesiras Nefesh, and she takes a bus down to Shar Shechem, and by Shar Shechem she's supposed to take another bus, and she sees, she wasn't feeling so well. Her head was a little, it was spinning, and she told me she was nauseous, and she noticed that there was a blue and white bus that pulled up. Now blue and white is the color of the Israeli flag, by the way. And it's interesting that Arab buses, their colors are blue and white, and the color of the Arab flag, which is green and red, that's the color of the Egged buses, the Israeli buses. So it's very interesting. So, she wasn't feeling that great, and she wasn't thinking. So she sees that there was a blue and white bus pulling up. She was using Google Maps, by the way, to get around, to get to Har HaZeisim. Never do that in Eretz Yisrael. And she gets onto the bus. She gets onto the bus, and she wasn't feeling that great. She didn't notice anything. She sits down, and she falls asleep. She falls asleep. She wakes up 25 minutes later. And she wakes up and she sees, she must have realized that she missed her stop, the bus stop. She was only supposed to be on the bus for 5 minutes. Within 2 minutes she fell asleep, and 25 minutes later she wakes up, and she's in the middle of Eastern Jerusalem. She doesn't realize it yet though. But she knows she has to get off the bus because she went too far. So she gets off the bus and she crosses the road to take a bus back from the direction she was coming from. But the problem is, because she was in Eastern Jerusalem, there was no real bus stop where she could find the bus. So she's waiting there alone, standing alone, stranded. She didn't know this, but it was actually the first night of Ramadan. First night of Ramadan, it's empty. It was towards evening, and all the Arabs were home. They were breaking their fast. Now, by the way, you can't believe that, if I wouldn't have heard this myself. By the way, this is just an unbelievable story. So listen to what happens. But it's a true story. It's true. She told it to me. I spoke to her 3 times, asking her all the details. So she gets off the bus. She's waiting for the bus stop to take her back from the direction she came from. She can't find the bus back. So she starts walking in the direction where the bus came from, where she came from. So she walks, and she sees that there is a settlement. She walks into the settlement, and immediately she realizes that she must be in Eastern Jerusalem, because First of all, the way the houses were, they were shuttered up. There were no street lights. I mean, and there were posters plastered on the walls from different, Palestinian heroes that gave up their lives killing Jews. And she can't read Arabic. By the way, now when I spoke to her, she learned Arabic, so just in case she ever gets involved in such a situation like that again. But she reads, she sees the pictures of the different Palestinians, and she realizes she's in trouble. She takes out her phone, and her phone is out of battery. Her phone died. So there she is, stranded alone in Eastern Jerusalem. Nobody's on the street. She doesn't know where to go. She doesn't know what to do. And of course, what does a Yid do in a situation like this? Shir la'mahalot tesoina yele'arim me'ayin yavo ezri. She starts saying Tehillim. And she's mumbling chapters of Tehillim, and she's really, really nervous. And she says, look, I got to make a shtadlis. I got to get out of here. So what's she going to do? So she decides she's going to look for the house that doesn't look so Arabic. It looks nice on the outside. Light comes out of it. The grass in the front is taken care of. So she sees a house, and she decides to knock on the door. She'll take the risk. There are no Palestinian posters hanging on the walls of the house. She knocks on the door, and in her mind, she tells herself that she's going to present herself as this social justice, pro-Palestinian, Californian UCLA student that's trying to write up an essay on the Palestinians, and she's working for their cause so she can save her life. But she knocks on the door, and she already in her mind, she already knows what she's going to say. She's only going to speak English, pretend not to know any Hebrew. And this woman, must have been a 19-year-old Palestinian girl, opens the door. She opens the door. She's wearing a hijab, and she's wearing all the shmeina begodim of the Arabs. And she looks at her, and she says, Chana? And Chana's caught off guard because Chana says, I'm supposed to be this social justice, pro-Palestinian girl from UCLA in Los Angeles. So this girl, this Palestinian girl, schleps her in, gives her a gigantic hug, and pulls out a card from off the shelf that Chana had written to her 6 months earlier. And she says in Hebrew, Arabic Hebrew, she says, Chana, yesh li takartis. She says, I still have your card. And this girl is so excited to see her. And Chana suddenly realizes who this is. And she remembered that 6 months earlier, she was actually running a program for Aish in Israel. And she was staying at the King Solomon with a group of girls. And she was there for 3 weeks. And she decided 6 months earlier that she's going to keep a notepad. And every person she meets, any staff member, the receptionist, the waitresses, the cooks, the bellboy, whatever, anybody in the hotel, she'll write down their names, their shifts, their interests, and she'll make it a point to really connect with every single person. So she told me she had around a list of 50 names in that notepad. 50 names. And she knew Mahmoud, Muhammad, it doesn't matter. Every Arab name is really, it didn't matter to her, everybody. And she said to me the last day, when the trip, they were about to check out of the hotel, they had this last breakfast. And by breakfast, she noticed that there was one staff member, she must have been new, this Palestinian girl. She's standing at the coffee station, handing out coffee, pouring coffee to every single person. And she says, well, I haven't seen you. What's your name? And she introduced herself, and they started schmoozing. And this Palestinian girl said, I want to go to medical school. I want to become a doctor. But I need a job. I have to save up some money, so I'm here. And I have a lot of family members here. They got me this job at the King Solomon Hotel. And she wrote down her name as soon as she went back to the table. And before she left, she made sure to write thank you cards to every single person. She didn't have money to give tips. And the last thank you card she gave to this girl who she had just met by the coffee station. And now she's face to face with this girl in Eastern Jerusalem. And the girl remembered her. And she said, Chana. And she takes out the card off the shelf, and she says, I still have your thank you card. Now, she's so excited to see Chana. She thinks that Chana came to visit her. Because she said to her before, and she said, come visit. So she pulls Chana into the kitchen where all the Arabs, they're breaking their Ramadan fast, and a lot of her family members who were staff at the King Solomon, and everybody recognizes her. Chana, so nice to see you. And she plays along, and 15 minutes later, she can't wait to get out. She says, it's so great, it's so nice to see everybody. And she says, is there a bus back? Can I take a bus back? And they looked at her, they said, no, there's no bus. You can't take a bus back. There's no buses right now. But the uncle said, I'll drive you back to the bus stop by Shimon HaTzadik, and you could take the train over there, the light rail to wherever you have to go. And she said, no problem. So she gets into the car with this Palestinian, the 19-year-old Palestinian girl with her uncle, and they come to the security checkpoint. And the Chayal looks into the car, and he sees like a Jewish girl with two Palestinians, and he says, Hakol Beseda? She said, yeah, these are my friends, And they dropped her off, and the next day she went again to the King Solomon. They worked at the King Solomon, and she thanked them profusely. But when I shared the story with people, I asked them, what are you more impressed with? Are you more impressed with the Hashgacha Pratis, or are you more impressed with a girl that stayed present and wrote down everybody's name, their jobs, their interests, and tried to connect in a genuine and real way with every person she met? And to me personally, I know that Hashem is great. I know Hashem runs the world. Hashem is, of course, that's a miracle, but it's not half as impressive as a human being taking the time, staying present, staying in the moment, trying to connect with every single person. Because we have to understand that if we want to develop deep and meaningful relationships, we have to be people that understand that of anybody who comes into your consciousness, anybody who comes into your life, it doesn't matter if it's for a fleeting moment or if it's forever. Just stay present. That's the only way you can develop a relationship to begin with. We live in such a fast-paced world, it's unbelievable. But just stay present. There's so many people who are vying and desperate for attention. Just give them the few minutes you have in a real and genuine way. I don't have that much time left. I want to talk about one more idea. And to me, this is a big one. The idea I want to talk about is also authenticity. My name is Yoel, and I'm named after the Satmar Rabbi, Rabbi Yoel. And there's a very famous story with the Satmar Rabbi, and I couldn't verify this. I tried to call Satmar Hasidim, my uncles, I tried to call a lot of people before I came here because I wanted to verify, is this story true? I couldn't verify it, but the message, nevertheless, is true. The Satmar Rabbi, Rabbi Yoel, was once at a Purim Tish. Purim is coming up, and every Purim, there used to be a Purim Ruv. By Hasidim, they have somebody who takes the position of the Rebbe for the day and pretends to be the Rebbe. And this fellow, he imitated and copied the Rebbe's, Rabbi Yoelish's voice, everything that he did perfectly. And Rabbi Yoelish used to cry when he davened. And this guy, he imitated Rabbi Yoelish. And all the Hasidim were having a good time. And somebody noticed the Rebbe was crying. So this Purim Ruv, he was very, very, he felt very bad. And he thought the Rebbe might have been offended by what he did. So he walks over to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I'm so sorry, I was just kidding. And Rabbi Yoelish said to him, I'm not crying because I'm offended. I'm crying because when I watch you and I see how perfectly you can imitate me, I think to myself, I hope that every day as I daven, I'm not imitating myself from yesterday. I hope that I'm authentic in my Yiddishkeit. I hope that I'm being real. Because we can become conditioned. There's a fellow, you might know him, Rabbi Lerner, Rabbi Yitzchak Lerner. Rabbi Yitzchak Lerner used to teach in Eish for many, many years. He called me last week. I called him first, I asked him to call me back. He told me the most incredible story about authenticity. And we could all take this home. Put it in your pocket and remember this story. It's worth remembering. he said to me that he wrote a sefer called Shmiras Haguf V'Hanefesh. It's an amazing sefer about all the sgulas and chazal, what a person can do to stay healthy, to lead a healthy life. So he wrote the sefer, and he had a shaila. Could we follow the medical advice of chazal? If you look at the Gemara's Midrashim, it's filled with medical advice that chazal give us. See, he wanted to know, could we follow today in 2018 the advice, the medical advice that chazal gave us 1,500, 2,000 years ago? So he sent a letter to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the Pesach Adar, and Rav Shlomo Zalman told him, wrote him in a letter, he said, the truth is that there are Rishonim, Rabbeinu Avram ben Rambam, and there's Rav Shira Goyen, who say that Chazal, when they wrote the medical advice in Gemara and Midrashim, they wrote the advice based on their scientific knowledge of the day. So because science has evolved, so he said that you can't really follow the advice of Chazal. You don't have to listen to them on medical advice and science. But Rav Shlomo Zalman says, "Ve'enoi ikar." We don't paskin like those Rishonim. I have to tell you, there are Rishonim, other Rishonim will argue, but I don't remember who they are. Shlomo Zalman says, "I don't remember." So Rabbi Lerner said to me, he said he was going to publish this letter in a sefer that he was publishing, Sefer Shmiras Haguf HaNefesh. And he was talking to some of his friends in the kollel, and they said to him, they said, "You can't publish this letter." They said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you're going to say that Rav Shlomo Zalman doesn't remember? How does that look on Rav Shlomo Zalman? The Gadol Hadar doesn't remember which Rishonim say that you have to follow the medical advice, or you could follow at least." So Rabbi Lerner said, "You know what, why don't I go ask Rav Shlomo Zalman himself? I'll ask him." So he goes to Sha'ar Chesed, he travels, and he goes up and he knocks on Shlomo Zalman's door. Shlomo Zalman opens, sits down, he says, "Look, I have this letter from you." Shlomo Zalman, by the way, he wrote the letter back on the other side of the page. Rabbi Lerner faxed me the letter. I forgot to bring it. I want to show it to you. It's unbelievable. Shlomo Zalman's ksav and how he wrote, I don't remember. Shlomo Zalman told him, he says, "Not only can you publish my letter, but you should publish my letter." So Rabbi Lerner said, "Are you sure it's not going to look bad?" He said, "What?" He said, "People come to me all the time. They think I know everything. At least I can publicize that I don't know everything. And sometimes there are other people who are studying a sugya, learning a sugya, they know more than me. And not only that," he says, "I don't know who the Rishonim are. If you publish this letter in your sefer, it could be that somebody's going to see that Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he said, Shlomo Zalman doesn't know, and he'll send you a letter who the Rishonim are, and then you'll tell me, and then I'll know." So Rabbi Lerner published the letter in the sefer, and sure enough, 2 weeks later, somebody sent him a letter and told him it's the Rivash, and showed him where it was. And he came to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he told him it's the Rivash, and he said to me, "You should have seen his face." He was so excited to find out the truth. Who cares about image? Authenticity. We're trying to project an image to the world. "Oh, I know everything, I'm perfect." No, we're human. It's okay not to know. It's okay to have weaknesses, it's okay to have faults. It's really okay. Be authentic. Nobody has it perfect. I always like saying that life stands on 4 legs. Shalom bayis, health, parnasa, and children, like a table. And if somebody tells you that all 4 legs in their lives are sturdy and strong, you know they're lying. No such thing. So even though on Facebook we might want to project a perfect image, I tell my members of my shul, I hope, this is my bracha to them, I hope your life is as good as it appears to be on your Facebook page. Say amen. It's not. It's okay to be authentic. It's okay not to be perfect. And by the way, if you project the perfect image, people don't feel attached to you. They don't feel like they can connect to you. If we want to develop real, meaningful relationships, be authentic. I think there was a woman by the name of Bronnie Weir. She was a palliative nurse. She worked in palliative care basically people who were diagnosed with terminal illnesses and were sent home to die. The doctors gave up hope. So she would be with them and she would take care of them until they passed on. She did this for around 30 years. At the end of her career, she published a book. And the book was called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And the number one regret of all dying people, and it's a very morbid statement here, but forgive me. The number one regret was, I wish I had the courage to live the life that I knew I can live and not what others expected of me. Authenticity means letting go of the image of the person other people expect you to be and learning to embrace yourself with all of the failures, all of your weaknesses, and just be human. Be real. That's all it takes. So I'll leave you with a nice vart. Gemara tells us that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he said that Kol Yomai, all my life, I was mechabed my father. And he said, I think I did a pretty good job in Kibbutz Av, he said. He said, but there was one person who really outdid me. His name is Esav HaRasha. Why did he outdo me? So he said, the reason why he outdid me is because when Esav was mechabed his father, he always wore fancy clothing, big day malchus, but I didn't. So really, he outdid me. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kol Yomai, I worked so hard on Kibbutz Av, but I didn't reach the pinnacle. Esav HaRasha surpassed me. Why? Because he wore a big day malchus. So the Heilige Yid HaKadosh, who's the Rebbe of the Kotzker, right? We're talking about authenticity, being real. Paradigm of that was the quintessential real person was the emistic person was the Kotzker, right? No Baba Mises. Now the Yid HaKadosh, who's the Rebbe of the Kotzker, he asks, so what's the problem? Let Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel put on fancy clothing. What's the big deal? Let him wear fancy clothing. If you're jealous of Asa for wearing fancy clothing when he was mechabed his father, so put on fancy clothing. That means I have to stop. So he said the following idea, very, very powerful idea. He said, the idea of clothing, what do clothing do? They cover you up. They help you project a certain image. Esav, when he was serving his father, he covered himself up. He wasn't authentic. He projected an image of perfection. He asked his father questions. How do you meister salt? Presented himself as a much bigger tzaddik than he was. Why? He wanted to be mechabed his father. He didn't want to cause his father pain. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, yes, in the short term, yes, it's Kibbutz Av. But what do you do? It's sacrificing your real relationship with your father. You're not authentic. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, I couldn't do that. I couldn't wear fancy clothing. I couldn't project a perfect image to the people in my life, because why? That'll sacrifice my authenticity. I won't be real, and if I'm not real, I won't be able to cultivate and develop the relationship in what it could be. Such a powerful statement. As we walk around and we try to connect with other people, let's try to stay real. Let's try to be real and authentic and say to them, look, I'm not perfect. And that will lead to a real connection, because then you can grow together with them. You know, when we do kiruv, we sometimes think that we have to have all the answers. After all, we're practicing it, so we have to be perfect. We have to be real. No, you don't. They respect you more when you tell them you don't know. I don't know either. Let's find out. Be real, be authentic, and stay in the moment. The Be'ezra Hashem will be zeicha to connect with people in a real and meaningful way. And we zeicha to be a Mashiach Tzedkeinu b'meir b'minu. Amen. Thank you.